Mm. All right. I think in the interest of time, and given we have a short hour, we will go ahead and get started. So thank you all for being here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's morning my time, but I'm really thrilled that others are joining across time zones. My name is Sonia Anderson, and I support INEE's work on data and evidence and have the pleasure of supporting this webinar. So just by way of a brief introduction, this webinar is included in a series of workshops that we've been holding through the INEE Data Working Group, focused on holistic learning outcome measurement in education and emergencies and protracted crises. So this series included a number of introductory sessions looking at kind of the why, the how, and the what of learning outcome measurement in EiEPC. And now we're really excited to be opening up this series to our broader membership to include a number of essentially case studies around learning outcome measurement. So this web event will present the findings of a recent learning assessment conducted in Mauritania. And I'm not going to take more of your time. I will hand over to our UNHCR colleagues, but just by way of a couple kind of housekeeping notes, a couple reminders, if you are having any trouble with your audio or visuals, please just let us know in the chat. We'll try and support you. Please do post questions, use the Q&A function. We really encourage you to do this throughout the webinar, and our presenters will do their best to be answering your questions live throughout the webinar as well. Feel free to use the chat box as well if you're more comfortable posting a question there, or if you want to kind of share a reflection or a comment. We encourage you to be active listeners. We will have time at the end of the webinar for more of an exchange, a Q&A. And I think with that, I will hand it over to Serenia, and just a huge thanks to our UNHCR colleagues for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Sonia. And dear all, good morning, good evening, and welcome to this INEE webinar. My name is Sirenia Chavez. I'm an education officer leading on data and evidence with UNHCR HQ. Before we begin the presentation, I wanted to extend a huge thanks to the RED International team, and more specifically to Robson, to Shasha, to Cedric, to Prosper, who all have supported the collection of data for this assessment that took place. We are really proud of the work that we've done together and the learning that we've done together on this exercise. I wanted to briefly pass over to my colleagues so that they can introduce themselves first before we begin talking about the presentation. And Miko, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Serenia. And well, thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Emiko Naka, and I'm working at education section in UNHCR. I'm a learning measurement officer, and yeah, working with the team on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Serenia. Thank you, Emiko. I am Erika Takemenye. I'm the Associate Education Officer for UNHCR Mauritania Operation.
I can introduce myself. I'm just moderating the discussion, but I'm Ali Krupar. I'm a lead advisor in research evidence and learning at Save the Children, and I'm really interested in the findings because we worked together a little bit on the measurement. So interested in hearing how it went and how it was adapted. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ali. Shreya, if we can start with the background slide, please. Great. To give you a bit of background information on what inspired this project, basically in 2022, the World Bank published an update on learning poverty, estimating that close to 70% of children aged 10 in low and middle income countries couldn't read a simple text. This was a continuation of the learning crisis that was highlighted in the World Development Report of 2018, and that was, of course, exacerbated by the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And while these reports have helped us to understand the state of learning, estimates and figures remain unavailable for forcibly displaced persons. So we don't really know what proportion of forcibly displaced learners are in learning poverty. The lack of disaggregated data by protection status in national, regional, and international assessments makes it very difficult to generate meaningful comparisons on the state of learning of forcibly displaced persons versus national students. This is data that would help to report on SDG indicator 4.5, which calls for eliminating disparities in education, and more specifically on indicator 4.5.1, which requires reporting parity indices, including for children in vulnerable situations. So this kind of evidence can be used to strengthen advocacy and to tailor support to specific levels and to respond to the needs of the population that UNHCR serves. Next slide, please. So the objectives of this study were twofold. First, we wanted to establish a baseline to better understand what is the state of learning of forcibly displaced children in selected contexts, and in this case, of course, in Mauritania. And then second, to identify learning gaps and provide recommendations to improve education outcomes of refugee children specifically. So I will now pass over to my colleague, Eric, to give a bit of context on the Mbera Camp in Mauritania. Over to you, Eric.
Thank you, Srinia. Okay, let's go to the context. Let's just try to locate where the study was carried out. Talking about the Mauritania context, let's talk about the Mbera Camp. The Mbera Camp was set up in January 2012, located 50 kilometers from the border with Mali. Some statistics. From the UNHCR report published on the 31st of December 2024, let's just say around 162,000 refugees and asylum seekers are registered in Mauritania, among which around 144,000 refugees registered in and around the Mbera Camp in Mauritania. Those are Malian refugees, because in Mbera Camp we have Malian refugees only in the camp. Let's move to the poverty rate. The poverty rate among refugee households is 59% compared to national average, that is 28%. The employment rate 12% compared to national average, which is 40%. Slide, please. Education in Mbera Camp. Let's talk about the situation in Mbera Camp as far as education is concerned. I will start by some statistics again. From the UNHCR implementing partner report, we have around 8,000 primary students and 400 secondary students are schooling in Mbera Camp. In Mbera Camp, we have 8 primary schools and 2 secondary schools. The primary and secondary school age children made up roughly 40% of total Mbera Camp population. Around 1,000 primary students and 300 secondary students are registered in urban area. Let's precise that a school in Mbera Camp follow the Malian curriculum, which is in French. And most of the educational staff, including teachers, are Malian. Slide, please. Challenges. Challenges as far as education is concerned is coming from the both sides, the demand side and also the supply side. We start by the low rates of enrollment. The gross enrollment rate in primary school is 34% versus 7% for the secondary school. This is in Mbera Camp, the area where the target for the study. For the challenges, we can list the poor quality of infrastructures and lack of quality teachers, overcrowded classrooms, poor learning environment. These are some, just to name a few. Slide, please. Talking about the refugee education policy, we can say that we have done a lot in that domain. These are some key achievements in that domain. The inclusion of refugees in national strategies and programs, like the RESEN and the PNDS3. The PNDS3 is some kind of education, the government national education roadmap. And we work with the government to advocate so that the inclusion of refugees should be taken into consideration in that particular document. The development of the budgeted action plan of the inclusion of refugees in the national education system in collaboration with UNESCO. You know, Mauritania right now is preparing to transit from the Malian program to the Mauritania program. And to do that, it was necessary that a budgeted action plan should be developed. And we work with that in collaboration with UNESCO and also the government, precisely the Ministry of Education. We also have the development of a roadmap for the inclusion of refugees in the national education system by the Ministry of Education still in collaboration with the UNESCO. It is some kind of breakdown of the budgeted action plan, because the budgeted action plan is a 10 years plan, while the roadmap will be for 3 years. The commitment of the Mauritanian government during the Global Refugee Forum for the inclusion of refugees in the national education system and the integration into the CIRAJ. The CIRAJ is the Mauritanian education management system. Is what we used to call EMIS. Now we have moved to CIRAJ. It's more developed and have more function to collect data in the sector of the education. Slide, please. Okay, let me give the floor to Emiko to continue the presentation, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Eric. So for this study, we aim to answer the following questions. First, how do refugee students perform on foundational skills? What factors such as gender, age, or family background indicators are associated with their learning performance? And third is what is the teaching and learning environment in schools? Next slide, please. The study includes both quantitative and qualitative methods. For the quantitative component, this measures foundational learning skills of students using HALDO, the holistic assessment of learning and development outcomes as a tool for data collection. HALDO tool was developed by Save the Children and is designed to assess status of learners impacted by crisis. The tool covers 4 domains: literacy, numeracy, social-emotional learning, executive functioning, and also a series of background questions. It has like adaptive structure. So for many questions, students will have to answer all parts of the question correctly in order to move or advance to more difficult content. The target for data collection includes 400 refugee students across all the 8 schools in Mbera Camp, and also 109 students from host communities from the public school in Fasala commune. For the qualitative study, this is conducted through focus group discussions on topics that includes about school experience, resources and facilities, school safety, teaching condition, and inclusion. And it was done with different groups of parents, teachers, and students in both the camp and also from the public school in Fasala. Now let's dive into the findings. Next slide, please. So for literacy, This figure show the result from the easiest task on literacy questions on HALDO, which is the identification of 5 most common letters in the language. Most students, they can do this task. You can see in the dark green shades on the bar graph, these are the proportion of students that could achieve this task, which is about 70% for grade 4 in total, combined refugee and host students together, and almost 90% for grade 6. And so these shares of students then proceed to the next literacy question. And for literacy assessment, there are about like 4 or 5 questions. This graph shows the result from the hardest or the last questions on literacy assessment, which is a reading comprehension. We can see that the figure, that there is a very small proportion of students that could accomplish this one. And there is a large share in red that did not successfully pass all the tasks that leading up to this question. Only about 10% of grade 4 in total, and 25% of grade 6 that could successfully complete this task, meaning they could answer all 5 reading comprehension questions correctly. Next slide, please. And this table summarizes the performance result from literacy assessment by dividing the skills level into 5 levels according to the HALDO questions. This shows basically what students can do and cannot do throughout the literacy assessment. We can see that the large share of students, or about half of the sample, fall in the red category. Meaning that they cannot identify 5 most common letters, give the names of the animals, or identify 5 infrequent letters. Although grade 6 performance looks better, but still many students fall into the lowest categories. And you can see in the green line, level 5, about 17.1% of the total sample, or about 10% of grade 4 and 32% of grade 6 are in this highest level, meaning they can read and understand simple text. And for the literacy assessment, for this part of the assessment, we took a kind of like a story, the passage for reading passage from grade 2 local textbooks. Next one, please. And now for numeracy, the results also show kind of like a similar pattern as literacy. This one is the result from the easiest question on numeracy test. So again, we can see that a lot of children, most of them, they could answer this one. But then the ones that are in red color, yellow, and light green, these are the ones that they couldn't answer all the questions, all the kind of like the questions in that particular set correctly. So then they do not proceed to the next level of the literacy assessment. Then this figure shows the result for the most difficult task on numeracy, which is a 2-digit subtraction and addition. This does not include multiplication or division, and it's not difficult considering that grade levels, but still like very few students could answer this one correctly. Yes, and then you can see the percentages about only 17% of grade 4 and 30. Sorry, it's not done here. Sorry, 17% of grade 4 and 35% of grade 6 from the overall sample could do this one in the dark green color. Next one, please. And here, similar to literacy, the table summarizes the result for on the performance level in 5 levels. Nearly 30% of the overall sample, or 28.8%, cannot identify simple numbers or answer the word problems. And about half of the sample are in the lowest performance level in the 2 red shades. And only 22% are in the highest performance. Yeah, here is the result for social and emotional learning. This section has a bit of different format from literacy and numeracy. The assessment divided into 2 sections, self-concept and empathy. Majority of students can answer the simple questions regarding self-concepts, such as giving their name, age, or the place like where they live. This is the questions from SEL 1 to SEL 6 in green color on the left of the graph. And then you will see that, as we ask more difficult questions, the scores start to decline. When we ask them about future aspirations, what they see themselves in the future, what do they think could support them to make that happen, and what they think would prevent that from happening. So this is like in the middle, SEL 7 to 11. So now the score kind of, decrease. And the last section, SEL 12 to 16, this is about empathy. We can see that the score also kind of like decline as the student, they struggle to answer these more kind of difficult, demanding questions. For empathy, the enumerators would show a picture of a child, a girl crying, and ask students what do they think, why the girl is crying, and what they can do to help, for example. Next slide, please. And another part, last part of HALDO is executive functioning. This assesses short-term memory and working memory. Short-term memory requires students to recite up to 6-digit sequence, and the working memory requires them to reverse a 3 to 5-digit sequence. And most students, they can do the less digit sequences, but they find it more difficult to, when the sequence get longer. And as shown in the figure, for the short-term memory, the scores also decline from 93% to 33%. And for working memory, the scores decline from 84% to 35% as the question become more demanding. And here, this graph shows the overall HALDO scores by percentage of correct answers for each of the HALDO domain. And the score is highest in social-emotional learning. And the difference by grade level between grade 4 and grade 6 is largest in for literacy and smaller for the other domains. And we can see that overall grade 6 performs better than grade 4, which is an evidence that there is learning taking place as students proceed in that grade level. Next one, please. And this one shows a comparison for students' overall scores by gender, status, income, and if they have books at home. So our analysis found that having books at home is a key predictor for student score, especially on literacy. The overall HALDO scores are not much different by other students and family characteristics. And the other slide, please. So this slide is kind of a summary of the results or findings that have already just been presented. The results in general suggest that HALDO scores are low given the basic contents and students' grade level. And also it's important to note that the percentage correct that we present in the previous slide are are, I mean, it could be misleading for students' performance because the HALDO contents are basic and it aims to measure foundational skills, and it's not at, the expected level for the grade levels. And lastly, the student and family characteristics or student status as refugee or host are not the strong predictors for this course. I think that's it from my side. I'm gonna pass the floor back to Eric to give a little bit of to share a bit of result from qualitative study, please. Eric, thank you.
Thank you, Emikibo. Okay, let's move to finding as far as focus group discussion is concerned. During the study, we noticed that children enjoy school, meeting with friends, appreciate opportunities for learning and play. It was an observation during the study. And also, school provides opportunities, positive and stimulating environment, and supports social emotional development for children. Going back to the challenges, what was listed, going back to the challenges, we noticed that children came about lack of materials, facilities, electricity, water, insufficient resources like material, chairs, desks, poor classroom conditions, lack of clean toilets, lack of play area. Were also mentioned shortage of teachers, overcrowded classrooms, limited communication between parents and school authorities. These are some the main findings that we noticed, and that was taken down during the focus group discussion. Please, Sirinia, over to you for the recommendation.
Thank you so much. Slide. So I'll first go for the lessons learned. This is the first time that we basically carried out an exercise of this nature at UNHCR. It is therefore of critical importance that data collectors have capacity and proper training in administering learning assessments. That was the first thing. While the questions for the assessment were generally child-friendly, further contextualization and sensitization of the tools is needed, as some of the items were still sensitive for children in forced displacement contexts. For example, questions around who the child lives with, if the child has lost a parent recently, were particularly of a sensitive nature, so they have to be further tailored. Then third, religion and norms need to be considered during the administration of the assessment so that they're culturally appropriate. And then there is also an uncertainty factor. In contexts in which UNHCR works, there can be frequent electricity outages, unstable internet, unfavorable weather conditions. All of them can hamper the rolling out of learning assessments. And then finally, the language. Some children in this case, in the context of Mauritania, speak Arabic or other languages other than French. So translators were required during the assessment. Slide. In terms of the recommendations, we have a couple of very general recommendations and one more pointed one. The first is to continue the inclusion pathway that has already begun to be paved for refugees into the Mauritanian education system. The second is to conduct a comprehensive assessment of school resource shortages and to prioritize items so that we can begin to address some of the most critical school resource constraints that have an influence on learning outcomes. And this is something that we can look at the literature to guide us in what are the best and most cost-effective measures that we can implement in this case. Then third, we should enhance parental and community engagement by establishing regular meetings to foster stronger communication where this does not exist, improve teacher training and support and identify specific training needs for teachers, strengthen student well-being and learning, and where possible, incorporate psychosocial services if resources allow, and advocate on the importance of including socio-emotional learning into the national curriculum as refugees are being included into the national education system. And then lastly, given that the only significant correlate of higher proficiency in the assessment was having books at home, the pointed recommendation is to expand access to books and libraries for forcibly displaced learners, as this has been proven to make a difference, at least on this assessment. I will now pass over to Ali for the moderated discussion where we will go over a couple of additional questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you. My computer is a bit slow today, so apologies on the hesitation between unmuting. Well, thank you, Serenia, Eric, Amico, for this presentation and the contribution of this study to our global understanding of measuring learning in forcibly displaced contexts. We're definitely learning a lot and we'll continue to do so. Some great questions are coming in already. So we're going to transition now to our discussion and thinking about preparing for this. I thought of 4 main questions to really focus on. Some are coming out of the conversation as well in the chat and in the Q&A related to methods and process, and then also thinking about next steps. So my first question is going to be for you, Eric. And so giving the sample size of 400, how much do you think this study can really speak to the experience of refugees in Mauritania? And what do you think may differ in Mauritania depending on the contexts, like different settings, like camp settings versus rural versus urban? You know, what are you seeing in terms of variation within Mauritania?
Okay, thank you, Alison, for the question. What I can say is that this study reports on the experience of refugee education in Mauritania, since the study targets the region where around 80% of education interventions are carried out in Mauritania. Talking about the differences in the Mauritanian context in terms of refugee education, the main difference is that refugee children in urban areas are directly included in the national education system, while those studying in the camp based in rural areas follow a parallel system. In fact, refugees children studying in the camp are Malian and they follow the Malian curriculum. However, the transition from the Malian to the Mauritanian program is currently being prepared and will start during the next school academic year.
Yeah, and I think that goes to another question I'm thinking in the chat about what the general challenges are that children are facing and how those differ based off of the context and what system they're able to access. Thank you. So the next question for me, and I'm going to move through my questions pretty quickly so that we have time for everyone else to jump in, is for Amico. So what sections of the, when we're thinking about the holistic assessment of learning and development outcomes, HALDO. So for those of you who don't know, I co-developed that tool and facilitated a training for the Mauritanian data collection team. So I'm very familiar with the tool, but I also, in that way, know its limitations. So what sections of that quantitative tool were most difficult to use? And how did you really address this? And what would you recommend in the future to sort of improve how we measure learning outcomes quantitatively?
Thanks, Ellie, and really, it has been great to work with Save the Children also on the launch of this assessment, and it has been a very interesting journey also with our partner in Mauritania with Red International, and I'm glad to see also some of our colleagues are here. I was with a team. Well, they were the one who actually implemented the tool, right? But I was with them during the pilot data collection, and so I could perhaps share my observation from those 2 weeks that I was there. I think most challenging is maybe not particularly on a specific section of the tool, but overall, I think, the fact that HALDO has, quite a bit of many questions that has the skip rules. I think that, somehow as some of the enumerators could, find it a bit challenging, to administer. And since if it's the first time, that they are doing this kind of assessment. That's one thing. And another thing I think Serena also mentioned in her presentation about language issue that, we have to mobilize in translators and in some cases, there's also like the culture that, that a girl cannot be with another man, and we have to mobilize another person, like this lady that is sitting there. So sometimes a translator, we have to also like try to find, a female person and so on. And the language is not just like one language, right? Even they speak Arabic. There are many version of, I don't know if I say this correctly, like kind of, many version of Arabic language, like, I don't know, Hassania, Tamashek, and so on. So it's really challenging in that sense. I think that's some of my kind of observation, but I think our colleagues here from RED, maybe some of them might want to share their direct experience on the ground as well. I don't know if Zaza, you are here, or Zaza or Robson.
Yes, I am here. I'm very grateful for this time of learning and thinking and reflecting on this experience. I think all of you have been very good in sharing our challenges, recommendations, and coming from a background of psychology, I was very much aware about the emotional outcomes as well, and maybe things that we never thought that will be reflecting deeply on the children. We like just for this simple question of where you live, or things about do we have books, what you miss, or whatever. I think sometimes the context can be quite painful, and I think the tool is quite sensitive, very sensitive, and we had the training what helping us to be aware about that. Yet we have been surprised by the pain that some questions can cause. So I think working in this kind of contexts needs more and more of this awareness about the pain, about the questions. I was very pleased to know that RED provide workers to be alongside the children. EMIC was there as well. So I think it was a sense of a sensitive framework, what respected the rights and the protection of the children. Yet, I think we need to be always aware about that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I see Robson is also online. Yeah, Robson, do you have, what would you like to chime in here?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Robson Diaz from RED. One of the challenges we faced that it was because of the time to do the assessment. It was during the summer time. So most of the children, to reach the children at the camp, and also to make some agreements with the teachers and the principals of the schools. So to prepare everything, it was a big challenge for RED.
Yeah, all important things to consider, especially when we're thinking about how best to support children while collecting data, not just through programming. Thank you for sharing. I think there are some other questions in the chat that are very relevant to this conversation. I'm going to move through. I have two more. I swear, only 2 more, and then we'll open up to those other questions. So please do keep those coming in. So the next 2 questions are really about looking forward with what UNHCR is looking at in terms of next steps. So Serenia, this one is for you. So how do you think, or how do you see UNHCR using learning assessment data systematically, and how can partners like Save the Children, like RED, support UNHCR to do so?
Thank you so much, Ali. Well, to use it systematically, we first need for systematic data to be available. And with this attempt, we're only beginning to chip away at this need to better understand the state of learning of forcibly displaced children. We need to establish collaborations with regional assessment bodies, and we have been doing that to first include refugee schools and refugee students in these assessments, and to disaggregate the data by protection status so that we can draw conclusions about the performance of forcibly displaced students, and hopefully in the future make meaningful comparisons between host and refugees. We're currently working with partners like Confemen, who administers the PASEC assessment on this, and we note that there are regional assessment bodies like UNESCO's Latin American Laboratory for the Evaluation of Quality Education that are already invested in including Venezuelans displaced abroad in key hosting countries, which is exactly the kind of efforts that we need to capitalize on. We need other assessment bodies like the OECD's PISA to also second these efforts, for example, for Ukrainian students in hosting countries. TIMS, PEARLS, other international assessment bodies could also be encouraged to do the same so that we don't just rely on a piecemeal approach to sort of filling these data gaps. And lastly, I would say that we need UIS to consider adding specific language on indicator 4.5.1 that explicitly mentions refugees so that they are not conflated with other vulnerable groups and sort of get lost in that concept. Efforts have been made in the past to generate pilot indicators for other indicators. For example, indicator 4.6.7, which means that this can be done if there is enough willingness to do so. Thanks, Ali.
Yes, I think we're feeling some pressure on that SDG reporting. And hopefully we can influence that. Thank you for that response. Okay, last question, but thinking about this moving forward. So for Eric or Miko, maybe you have some thoughts on this. What are the next steps for UNHCR's learning assessment activities internally?
Thank you, Ali, for the question. I think the first of our next steps will be to conduct a study on the impact of the curriculum transition once it has started, using the learning measurement study as a baseline. Besides, we have been already working with the World Bank in their Inspire project for its service delivery indicator survey, for which we share the learning measurement evaluation report for their information. I think for the UNHCR, this is the key first step for the study. Thank you, Ali.
Great. So I'm going to pull out some of the questions.
Sorry, Ali.
No, Miko, yes, go
Sorry,
ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just to add, on what Eric mentioned, he mentioned about, what is what's going to happen in Mauritania, but also just want to add that, overall, like from UNHCR, we also have a large program that will be launched later this year that is funded by Educate a Child and focusing on basic education for refugee students, children. So learning assessment, and this will cover a number of countries. And learning measurement will be part of the resource framework as an indicator within the resource framework. So that's the plan that, there would be more kind of like, learning assessment for children in these countries under the project as well. And another thing is we have an ongoing learning assessment in a DRC with partner impact initiatives, and also this is funded by a joint data center, right? So yeah, I think that's that's it. Just want to add to that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Really interested in learning more about that Educate a Child too, from the global perspective of the different projects. So I was going to pull out some questions from the chat and then make sure that we can address as many as we can. I know some have been answered already in the presentation and in your responses here, but there are two about local, working with local stakeholders that I think it would be good to hear, maybe Eric, Zaza, Robson, if you want to talk about. One focusing on selecting HALDO and sort of designing, contextualizing, adapting the tool so it's relevant for local stakeholders. And then another on the findings, getting how the local stakeholders have received the findings, how have you shared it back, what is some of the feedback that you've received? So maybe Eric, could you start off on that? Or maybe Zaza and Robson?
So maybe I can share a bit about, I'm just wondering as well how we will try to implement some of the recommendations, talking about the situation and the context of the children. I'm very interested if it will be Emiko who was talking a bit about some others possibilities to learn and other measurements that is being done. Another thing that for me was important to learn is how the word evaluation is still threatening or is still making people to feel a bit, even we've been talking about assessment, and Robson mentioned about time and how it's important to have the stakeholders a bit more involved beforehand, because they take more ownership of the process and they cannot feel that is something about us and themselves, but we embrace it together in terms of looking forward for changes and transformational journey together, so we can embrace it together. So I think this is what comes to my mind now, is about these elements.
Yeah, Ellie, can I join this, like answering to this question? Sorry, I don't mean to add into like every answer, but I think one thing that we did, like share the findings also like with stakeholders. We conducted dissemination events in like different levels. You know, we also had like dissemination event with all the parents, the teachers in the camp, and also in Fasala, and then at the local and national level in Nouakchott as well. And we had like good participation. People were really interested in, especially like, you know, in the Fasala and also in Mbera Camp. And then they were also asking like, how could they, you know, help to the students, you know, to improve their learning. And I think they were very passionate about the discussion and actually we shared, I thought, you know, there is recommendations in HALDO on the Move, the guide for HALDO on the Move, which is another tool. Well, it's not another tool, but it's like the tool that's built on the original HALDO, right? But this is used in Mexico and around North America and the migration route. So in that guide, there is a kind of annex, you know, table of recommendations for what teachers or parents, or, you know, like they can do to help children to improve their reading, numeracy, literacy, and so on. So we try to, you know, print out that table, translate it into French, and share with people at the dissemination event as well. So, you know, something to share with them, something that is like kind of hands-on, that they could already, you know, help on day-to-day basis to improve, help improve the environment and provide some kind of like a resource for children to improve their learning. So I think that's one thing that I wanted to And then also for the tool, I think there was a question also about how the tool was done, like contextualization of the tool. We also had a pilot. We tested the tool, and then we adapted, and we had a discussion with the team. For example, like the question about who you live with. We try to kind of like put it in a very sensitive way, to ask students, for example. So I think that's it. Sorry.
One more thing that I like to celebrate, the focus groups were very good as well. I think it was a great opportunity to listen to the participants. And I think it was a good tool as well as a part of the whole process.
Mm-hmm. And there were some methods questions in the chat. I think we've addressed most of these, but the language of the assessment, and then how the sample was distributed across schools. And then I think the last one there about the focus groups, Zaza, might be interesting if you could talk a little bit about like who was included in the focus groups, host community, refugees, and a little bit more on that, because it sounds like there's a lot of interest in the qualitative data as well. So Amiko, I think first on the just clarifying the languages, particularly for literacy, and how the sample was distributed. And then Zaza, I think we can talk a little bit more about that qualitative work.
Yeah, sure. Maybe I just go like very brief on the language was French, because that's the language of instruction in Mali curriculum in the camp school. So that was in French. The schools, we cover all the schools in Mbera Camp, 8 schools. And for Fasala, it was 5 schools out of, I think, like 7 or 8. There were like total less than 10. And then we did like 5 schools in Fasala. Over to Zaza.
Yes, talking a bit about, I don't know, Ellie, if I understood it well, but it's to talk a bit more about the quality, isn't it, of
Yeah, about the qualitative data. So the focus group discussions, the first question is really who participated in them. Was it refugee communities as well as host community members? Was it only focused on people experiencing displacement? And then if you could just speak a little bit more about what kind of information you were getting from that. And you mentioned it as part of the sort of contextualization and getting that more rich feedback. If you could highlight some of the things that were really jumping out at you.
I think it was very important to have these qualitative spaces, and I think even the quantitative spaces has his own quality as well. I mean, in terms of we've been aware about that. The parents and the teachers and the children and some of the workers in the community, like the people involved in the education, they've been a part of the focus group where we have some questions, we have some good sessions before with Sirenia and Emiko were helping us to Cedric and Prosper and myself to be involved in this process. We had some other Reds people involved as well. I think we had a good atmosphere. We tried to create a good space for them to feel not intimidated to participate. And we tried to raise the questions and to have a good participation of all of them. It's not always easy not to be biased, but we've tried deeply. So I think to have the children talking about how is their school, how they think their school should be, and giving them a space to have a voice, it was very important. And I think this is space of the community to voice what they think about the education in the refugee camps and in Fasala as well, in the host community, I think was a good asset and was important as well for all the information that we have had. So I think it was a tool that helped with the whole process. So I think it was a good time to listen in and to embrace what they had to say and what they had to recommend as well.
Thank you. Being mindful of time, we only have a couple minutes left. I will just wrap up on my side that it sounds like the participatory process, both with the qualitative data as well as defining this tool with local and global stakeholders, is a real strength of this project. So thank you all for sharing that. And then last thoughts, maybe from Serenia. We haven't heard from you in a minute, or Amico. It would be great to hear. Any last takeaways you'd like to share?
Well, maybe just to say thank you for everybody who joined, as I said before, to the Red team for also being here and sharing their really valuable insights from the field. I really hope that we can continue to work together and that this is the beginning of a larger effort to take the measurement of learning in forcibly displaced contexts more seriously. So over to Amico for her concluding thoughts.
No, I think I don't have much to add. It just, has been a great pleasure to work with everybody. It's really a rewarding experience. I hope that, yeah, definitely this is gonna be a great, start, for more work to do in this area, I guess. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. With that, we will close. Just a note to say, I think some of you have been asking about access to the PowerPoint or recording. All of this will be made available in the coming days on the INEE website on the events page. So you can feel free to access it all there. A huge thanks to all of our participants for joining and engaging so actively. And of course, to all of our speakers and presenters, Serenia, Emiko, Ali, Zaza, Robson, Eric, and Shreya for your support as well. So really appreciate all of you joining us today and hope this is a continuing conversation. Hope everyone has a nice rest of your day, evening, and take care. Bye. Thank you, everyone.